welcome to another episode of the Pirate Monk Podcast. Yes, we're here, and a very special episode it is, because not only are we joined today by our co-host with the most from the left coast, Aaron Porter. Hey there, Aaron.
Good morning.
But we also have with us, via the magic of the worldwide interweb from Atlanta, none other than the legendary Michael Leahy of Bravehearts. Hey, Michael.
Hello, Nate, and hello, Aaron.
Good morning to you. The legend. Wow.
Oh, he really is. This guy has spoken on, well, how many hundreds of campuses do you think?
Thousands, Nate. Tens of thousands. Been doing it since I was about 4 years old. So tell him my story, man.
We're going to get to your story later, Michael, and you got a great story, but one that is not unfamiliar to the tribe that listens to this podcast. All of us who thought we were completely unique found others with stories with striking similarities to our own. It's so good to have somebody who knows the terrain and has been guiding others across it for quite some time.
Yeah, it's nice to be home.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Michael, you and I connected a few weeks ago at a radical mentoring conference.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. What a great time that was.
And we got to hear your story. Actually got to hear your story live for the first time. Mm-hmm. And it prompted me to finally buy and start reading your book. I apologize emphatically for waiting for so long, because it's a great book, and we really enjoyed your share at that conference, and it really, as per usual, when you share on this kind of topic, really touched a lot of guys.
Yeah, that's kind of shooting fish in a barrel, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, how are you doing? Give us an update, because it's been a while since we've heard from the Natester. How's things in the Franklin realm?
Oh, it's good. It's exciting. It is unpredictable. However, I tell you what, there are some wins in the Samson sales these days. I really do. Not everything, a lot of things we can't talk about yet on the podcast, but some exciting developments in the world of the Samson Society. I think Michael's a big part of. I know Aaron's going to be a big part of it. He doesn't even know it yet. It's going to be
surprise.
Yeah.
Surprise. We're all coming to your house tomorrow, Aaron.
All developments will be held in the strictest
confidence. Hey, what I think we should go to the mailbag.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Listeners, bless you. I'm actually glad we did this interview before, and it didn't work out audio-wise. It won't get into it. But at the end, I rebuked the listeners for not writing to us anymore. And immediately afterwards, Nate sent me a whole bunch of letters that had been sent. So
what does that mean, Aaron? Did they somehow transcendentally pick up on your vibe, and they just started feeling, I feel like I need to write to Aaron and Nate today?
Now, I think what it means is, here as everywhere else in life, I'm the last person to know. So what do we got? Read us some letters. I want to hear what's happening.
Okay. All right. Here one comes from our good friend, Justin. He says, "Hello, my degenerate brothers. You asked for listener questions on a previous podcast, so I figured I would send one in. I try to avoid asking questions, mainly because I don't always like the answer or the accountability that comes with having an answer. Well, here goes my attempt to ask. I notice I'm very good at hitting the cruise control button for life, staying in the routines and patterns that make up my day to day. I can easily avoid reading my Bible, praying, or any activities that would involve Christ. I don't doubt my salvation, but I question why this is so easy for me. And with my Southern, quote, Christian, unquote, upbringing, I automatically chalk this up as I must not have been sincere. Well, I know that's bullshit. I don't want to negate the power of the cross or salvation, but I have to wonder, if I really love Christ, why am I this way? What can I do different? And what the hell do I keep doing wrong to get this way? It's not the first time. I want to change my life. I've been in a perpetual state of lazy or depression for more years than I care to count. I want breakthrough, but of course I want the easy answers for it. So any advice or suggestions would be great. I love listening to you guys. Keep doing the podcasts, please. The more the better. Listening to them helps me put my thoughts and feelings into words where I normally can't, and also offers alternative perspectives that differ from mine. Thank you, and God bless.
Wow. That needs a whole
Pretty cool.
hour-long show, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, there is no quick answer to that. So, Nate, give it a shot.
Well, it is all about the daily disciplines. And that's a crucial part of the path. We learn those disciplines. And what I've found in my own experience is that I really need the help of my brothers just to do that. Not to shame me into it, but the fact that the daily disciplines or my lack thereof remain a part of the daily conversation is really crucial for me. I really resonate with Justin in that I go through peaks and valleys when it comes to certainly spending time in my Bible, even times in prayer. Right now, I'm kind of in peak prayer mode just because there's so much uncertainty in my life, and I'm afraid. I tend to pray more in the valley than I do when things are going swimmingly. But I also have a Silas who talks openly about his own continuing battles in the area, and that helps keep the focus on daily disciplines for me. What do you think, Aaron?
Yeah, all of that, definitely having partners in it is huge. The one discipline I find that helps at a heart level is acknowledging God. You know, that whole trust in the Lord with all your heart. Well, how do you do it? Don't lean on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge Him. Acknowledging God, it seems to be one of those practices that isn't talked about much, or we over spiritualize it.
Wow.
Acknowledging someone is like they come in the room and you go, "Hey, there it is. I just acknowledged them. That's it."
Oh, wow.
If I, throughout my day, if I think, okay, God, seriously, today I'd like to just acknowledge you. The way I do it is just with anything saying, "Hey, God, do you have an opinion about this?" And just acknowledging that God does have an opinion about everything, like little things. I'll see a car I like. I saw a 64 Corvette yesterday in Paso parked, and I just said, "Hey, God, do you like this as much as I do? I love this car." By acknowledging God, I don't have to be like, "Oh, I got my 20 minutes in the Word," because frankly, I can open my Bible and not be with God, not even acknowledge God. And I've got 2,000 years of church history where most people were illiterate or didn't have access to a Bible, and yet they were able to grow in relationships with God. So it just, for me, that's the heart-changing discipline, which is not complicated. It just takes remembering to make that choice in the morning and then trying to remember throughout the day.
Acknowledge Him. Oh, I love that, Aaron. I really love that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I thank you for the note, Justin. That was you asked, what'd you say? Am I crazy or why do I do this? I mean, this, you have described the common condition of man that everything in our flesh is pulling away from a relationship with our Abba. And that's, my flesh doesn't want me to be connecting. And so I shouldn't be surprised when my flesh takes me to flesh food and flesh places where it can feed and suppresses my appetite for the holy.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
You have anything to add there?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing that I thought of as I heard Justin, really making an emotional appeal on that is, I think back to Paul. I think back to the Apostle Paul and how he speaks about, the things I don't do that I want to do or should do, and the things that I, do that I shouldn't do. And I mean, he's just kind of, he's expressing, I think both of them are expressing the tension. Andy talks, he's done a whole speaking series on this. I love the way he brings it up. He says, we have to recognize that it's our normal condition to live within a certain tension, that the relieving of that tension is not our normal state. That's why we have the Holy Spirit inside of us, but yet we walk with the flesh, and that's our natural inclination, yet we're called to walk in the Spirit. That's why that we're called to holiness, but yet we live in an increasingly pornographic world. And so, I think going back to what you said, Aaron, I think it's important, especially for addicts like ourselves, to acknowledge the truth, acknowledge the reality of our condition, right? We had to acknowledge that we had a problem, we had a sin problem. I think we need to acknowledge that we are prone to wander, that it is in our nature to not want to submit ourselves to God. It's in our nature to not consecrate ourselves to being holy. It's in our nature to not pursue that relationship with God. It's in our nature to fulfill the lusts of the flesh. And so that's, that gets back to, the daily disciplines need to be in place. Connecting with others needs to be in place. Connecting with God and acknowledging his role in our life needs to be in place. But I think also recognizing that, if after pleading with God to remove the thorn from his side, wasn't a request that God answered in the way Paul hoped he'd answered, all the more reason to keep him in relationship with God. Maybe that's part of the formula that he uses with us, and with this inclination we have towards pornography or towards, booze or towards drugs or whatever our weakness is, to escape in that relationship. This is kind of a remembrance for us of why we need God. Because, and Nate, we talked about this before. If God really truly removed my desire to fulfill sexual temptation into sexual sin, I'm pretty certain I wouldn't be spending much time with God.
Yeah.
There's one encouragement too that I'd give, and I don't know why this has just been in my head for 9 months, but the phrase "give me 3 months and I'll change your life." If I know going into a life change that if I just, okay, fine, I won't want to do it, but just give me the 3 months. This is spoken to my own heart. Like, come on, heart, give me 3 months, and everything will be different.
Yeah.
So we have to remember that, especially at the beginning of taking a step, a courageous step, and to make sure that first step goes straight to some brothers so that I'm not alone, and that this isn't about making promises, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
This is just about making some changes.
But there is something about, as they know in 12-step recovery, those 90 and 90, something about 90 days. That short stretch. All right. Hey, how about another letter? All right. This one comes from Jason. Guys, my name's Jason. I've been regularly attending a Samson meeting for a couple of years. I need your help reconciling what an appropriate response would be when a Samson member makes a statement to the group that I believe is not truth. So my basic question is, I say to the group, I disagree with a statement that a group member makes during a meeting. Can I say to the group that I disagree? I know that we are to make our statements to the group as a whole and not direct them at any one person, as those comments are best reserved for private moments between friends. So you just listen to the meeting format. For context, my question comes from a meeting where pornography was discussed. Now, I'll not dive into details, as that would break strictest confidence, but I will highly generalize and summarize the comments to this. Looking at porn is not all that bad, and in some cases does not objectify women. It simply meets a need of mine because I am single. Well, I don't believe this generalization breaks strictest confidence, but if you do, please reply that it does. Feel free to correct my interpretation of strictest confidence. No, This is good, man. Is it appropriate to simply say that I disagree with those comments to the group and leave it at that? Or is this situation exactly what the private moments between friends was intended to cover? Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, meeting etiquette question. We haven't had one of these for a while.
Yeah.
The first easy answer is yes, this is exactly what a private moment between friends kind of a conversation looks like.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling that Jason is a little worried about the rest of the group and what they're hearing. As far as is this giving other guys that are struggling permission?
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts, Nate?
Yeah, I think there is a way to counter that graciously and obliquely. What I would do if I were in the group is I would say thanks, whoever you are. I mean, that's where you are. Thank you for telling us the truth. I mean, that a guy is at a point apparently where he's rationalizing his porn use based on his situation. He's generalizing it. And I've done that. I've said those words not out loud, but I've certainly said them to myself. Did during my college years. What I would probably then say is something like this. My experience is different from my brothers here. I remember saying the same thing to myself, and not, feeling that I was maybe even using porn to prepare myself for marriage or to stave off a more deadly sexual sin. And I didn't realize at the time how I was poisoning myself and my marriage day by day. I'd probably talk a little bit, but keep it to I statements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that we don't get into an argument about porn.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you handle it, Michael?
Oh, this is real interesting because this shows the difference in the tool sets that we use.
Mm-hmm.
I'm familiar with those kinds of scenarios from my days in Sexaholics Anonymous, SA. And I loved the opportunity that they gave me to find a safe place to be able to do a little bit of talk therapy, hear myself say things, but hear other people's, get other people's thoughts as well, not directed at me, but at the topic.
Yeah.
The safety was key.
Yes.
And I think I feel like in that group, there would have been people with dissenting opinions airing that, but in a way that wasn't demeaning to that individual. And I definitely think that needs to be said. Otherwise, those kinds of groups cease to be beneficial.
Right.
Because that is, for those of us who have struggled with sexual addiction, like I have for many years, a truly detrimental, falsehood. That, again, I was at that place too, and a lot of other people have been. The and maybe this will tail well into what we talk about later on, Nate. But I think this is where I see the role of a mentor.
Yeah.
And the role of group mentoring being able to play out. So in group mentoring, again, you have to remember that it's group mentoring, not 12-step group or not group think or what have you. We still have the same rules in terms of you don't attack a person's opinion or where they're at and all that, but there is a leader, a clearly identified mentor. It's like a group being led by a Silas, and the Silas leads that group. It's not just a collective of whoever shows up that day.
Yeah.
So we would probably be a little bit more direct, have more conversation around the topic.
Yeah.
But the mentor would, I can assure you, would not allow that to kind of remain as the, hey, if you feel that way and you want to go on through your life, that's fine. If not, and in terms of the one-on-one mentoring, again, it's wonderful to get guys to share honestly what they really think and really feel, because there's no reason to sugarcoat it. to try and appease the mentor, I tell these guys, listen, you can lie to me every time we meet. I usually meet with my guys once a week for an hour in a format like this, or by phone or in person. But they can tell me, oh, I didn't act out, didn't have any struggles. If they're lying through their teeth, it's only hurting them. It's costing them also. It's costing them time. It's wasting my time. But so it doesn't really serve them any purpose. But again, that's because there's a lot of differences between that format and a Samson group, and the other one is that we are very specifically focused on one issue and one issue only in Bravehearts, and that's habitual sexual sin.
Right. Yeah.
I love the gracious idea you were giving, Nate. And I think at the beginning, acknowledging that what he did actually did take some courage, unless he's totally oblivious and incredibly socially awkward, which is possible. If not, he knows that nobody else in the church, and certainly not in that room, agrees, and he's stepping out to say it. And so even though we all think this is like really a silly idea and missing a lot of pieces of wisdom, he is being open to telling a group that. And so I think that gives an easy in, that affirming someone in that way opens them up to hear the rest of the story. And it sounds like God's really put this on Jason's heart. So he's the man to sidle up next to this fella and say, hey, especially if he's married, really an older guy that has been married, and says, you know what, I have been where you're at. I've been single, and I would love to talk to you about what you said, and I had some thoughts on it. Would you be willing? And asking for permission is the door into that. Anytime you ask someone, can I speak to that? When they say yes, there you go. The door is open. But if you just start confronting it, because you have the truth and they have a lie, so therefore I have every right, then the conversation will go differently.
Yeah. And you'll shut them down. They won't ever open up honestly again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And this can be done with your local Samson group in the meeting after the meeting, which sometimes turns out to be more valuable than the meeting itself. Sitting across the table from somebody and having informal time. That's where I have taken the opportunity, and I've overheard others on many occasions take the opportunity to follow up on a share.
Do you know what really sucks about this? This whole thing is totally applicable to all of us in our marriage. Like, how often do I affirm my wife's courage before stepping into something I think I disagree with? How often do I ask permission to step into something instead of just saying, that's ridiculous, we need to do it this way? Like, all of these principles would make my life better.
And with our kids.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, you're all stupid.
Yeah.
Next letter. This is dumb.
Okay. All right.
Let's do one more. Do we have time for one more? Okay.
Yeah, we got one more. Here we go. This one comes from Jonathan.
And by the way, you guys, if you have a name that doesn't start with J, you're also allowed to send letters.
Way to pick up on the pattern.
I'm noticing that.
Yeah, I went straight to the J's. All right. Hey, Pirate Monks. I just listened to the last podcast, and I had a question. Here's the situation. I feel like I've learned a lot about how to share emotional intimacy with other guys. However, I don't feel that I know how to do this with my wife well. I feel safe enough to be goofy and drop my cool card, so to speak, but I wouldn't say that I feel as safe with her as I do with my Silas or guys at the meeting. Likewise, she doesn't feel safe enough with me to share her emotional process with me. I'm not saying I want to share everything I share at the meeting or with my Silas, but I want to feel safe enough with her that I feel like she can empathize with me. I want to feel like she'll get it. I want her to feel the same. So, with an addiction in tow, how do I traverse this emotional distance?
Yeah, there you go. There's a minefield question. This is a whole nother show as well, isn't it?
Yeah, no kidding.
No quick answer on this. I love that he wants to have this. What a great heart to desire to have this intimacy with her. there's a lot of pieces of information missing for us to be able to answer this well, I think, such as how much does she already know about his addiction? So
Yeah.
is this an opening to a new conversation, or he just wants to be able to share in the journey with her? So I think we can only answer it generally, but give us a general answer, Nate.
Well, I do think one of the things that I love about a Samson meeting is that we seldom wind up focusing on a specific sin, what the moralists would designate as a sin. So we're not talking, so seldom do we, talk about the merits of pornography. What we're talking about are these deeper issues, the kind that Jesus regularly pointed out in his conversations with, or his denunciations of the Pharisees. And so I'll wind up talking about my greed or my fear in ways, and I learned to do that first in this safe container that I found in a 12-step room. I don't burden Allie with the ongoing saga of whatever form some kind of sexual temptation might take. I wish I was no longer sexually tempted. That's not the case. But Allie doesn't need to know where the needle is on any given day. She has a right to an honest answer to a direct question, and she'll always get one from me.
Which pause there, because I think that's really important. Other guys could hear that and say, oh, "Okay, so I don't have to be open with my wife." You and Allie are very clear. She has said, "I don't need or want to know things. I want to know you're telling somebody."
Right.
So, like, you guys have established all of that together.
Right. Exactly. So, but it can really be. In our case, it can be emotionally, because Allie has a hard time, as I think most women do, just looking at all of that objectively, because she's a female, not a male, and because she will tend to. Anyway, that's a whole different deal. But I am talking about it daily, and I'm talking about it with. Not just with my Silas, but I talk about it with the guys I'm silencing, with the guys I'm walking with. But mostly what I'm talking about with them, and this is the conversation I can bring home, is I talk with my guys daily about where I am, what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, and what I'm doing. And I learned to do that first with other guys. I think there are a lot of, my sense is that there are a lot of wives who feel kind of walled out and left out from the emotional lives of their husbands.
Yeah.
And they do want to know. So Allie needs to know when I am sad, and when I am angry, and when I am afraid. And we can get closer when we can talk about where my heart is.
See, that is a great safe door in for which J was this again? Jehoiakim? Who is this?
one of the J men.
Yeah, this is Jonathan.
Jonathan, thank you.
Yeah.
That is such a good safe door in, where he can increase his intimacy by having the regular conversations where he's saying, this is the emotion I'm feeling. And that will lead to conversations that might open some other doors, but his wife is going to appreciate that, because that's another unknown factor here for what Jonathan needs to do. Is we don't know his wife and what her capacity is. Some wives are amazing partners in walking through these things. Others, it's a big struggle. And just to say things out loud like, honey, I'm having a hard time in these ways, but I'm afraid to talk to you about it because I don't want whatever. Like, just to state it, say what it is, and she'll deal with that. Then their realities. Silas's are easier to talk to because there aren't the same consequences. My Silas won't withhold sex from me. He's always ready. No. So
Edit. No.
of course, there's different consequences, and so to just acknowledge some of those fears honors her, because you're not trying to manage her, or handle her, or control her. You're bringing your honest self to her, and still being wise enough to know, okay, this topic isn't helpful for her heart, so I'm just going to talk about the feelings behind it, not the specific act or the specific thing.
Yeah, yeah. What's your contribution there, Michael?
Yeah, I tell my guys that, being involved in the group process is a great, and especially dealing with the awakening of emotions and feelings that have been suppressed and self-medicated through our inappropriate coping mechanisms. This is a great training ground for becoming a good husband, for becoming a good father. We get to practice truth telling, and sometimes we'll get slapped up the head, but the consequences aren't near as dire as when we could create potentially permanent rifts between us and our loved ones. And so the one thing I would mention to this J-Man in particular that I kind of heard toward the end of his letter was he sounded to me like a guy who's still very much in process, as he mentioned that he doesn't have this with his wife, but he would love for her to be able to empathize with him and for her to be able to understand him. And I would just caution him to say, if you want to create those emotional connections with your spouse, I suggest that you start thinking in terms of what can you do to empathize with your wife, not what she can do to empathize with you. What can you do to understand your wife better? Don't approach her like, I wish we had this ability to be able to communicate like I can communicate with my guys in Samson group, because they understand me, they empathize with me. Why don't you understand me or empathize with me better? I mean, he'll get slammed. She's going to be like, well, idiot. It's because you're giving yourself emotionally to this group of guys, but you're not making yourself emotionally available to me. And one of the reasons is because you start off right off the bat saying, well, when are you going to empathize with me? When are you going to understand me? And so that's, I think, just an inevitable part of the growth stage. It's moving from the self-centered view of the world into an other-centered view of the world, crossing over that chasm. And that is part of gaining emotional, I call it the EQ, your emotional quotient, if you will, the ability to be able to connect with others emotionally, and you really do have a responsibility and a need to do that with your spouse, and to always be working at how can I make myself more available and do that better over time. So you got a great practice area to do it. But understand that this is a process that has its own cycle, that has its own timeline with your spouse. And much like you had mentioned, I think, Aaron, you don't really know. I mean, she may have been so traumatized by this that she shut down on you. I have guys that I work with all the time where their story is their spouse is shut down. They've created this kind of response in them. And so it's going to take a lot longer and a lot of work and maybe some outside help for her to be that kind of an emotional partner that you may find in your group. I think all guys that go into this recovery process and have the benefit of a safe place to be able to go and be fully known and fully know others, we find it incredibly refreshing, and we want that in all of our relationships. But then, we scratch our heads going like, how do I do this with my wife? And it just takes time. So.
Great questions, and we want more of them. We covet your questions. So you can send them to
piratemonkpodcast@gmail.com.
And we will be right back to hear the story behind the man who is casting out pearls of wisdom for all the listeners to hear. We'll be right back on the Pirate Monk Podcast.
There was was a time when we were innocent. Our naked bodies felt the warmth of the sun. But with perfection we were not content. One man's infection spread to everyone. And even after the cure, we pick the poison. Whoa. And who takes a hammer to his heart?
And we are back on the Pirate Monk podcast. I want our listeners to get better acquainted now with Michael Leahy, who thanks, Michael, for stepping in on the mailbag portion of the program. That was great.
It was fun. That was fun. I love it.
Yeah.
Maybe
Now,
we'll get to the rest of the alphabet next time.
now, it turns out you and I are contemporaries in a lot of ways. We're roughly the same age. We've been in recovery roughly the same amount of time. Stories went in different directions, but can you... What I really want to do is I want to talk about mentoring, but before we get there, kind of put us in context. How did you get where you are? You didn't just decide 15 years ago when life was all peachy and wonderful that you would maybe go get a graduate degree in mentoring or something.
Or just share, go around and tell people about my relationship with pornography and masturbation and orgasm and sexual acting out, all that kind of fun stuff. You didn't have that on your career plan, Nate?
Was not on my career plan. No.
It's so funny.
You should have had a different counselor.
In high school, I took one of those tests that tell you your career, and that's exactly what it said I would be doing.
It said you'd be talking about your sexual addiction. Is that it?
Just looking at pornography and masturbating.
Oh, just looking. Really?
Yeah, I didn't take the test.
It was a weird test. I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't take the test. I was off looking at pornography and masturbating. So,
That's right.
So with that said, go ahead.
Well, yeah. I mean, the age. My age tells all. I'm 58. By the time your listeners hear this, I may be 59. I got a birthday in a couple of weeks.
I thought that was a comment on how long it takes us to upload these things. That's
yeah. I have a birthday in 9 months. So, but very good, Aaron. Very quick. No, I mentioned that because most guys my age, and you had some of this as well, Nate. We get to tell the stories like, grandfathers talk about walking, 3 miles in the snow to get to school. And so, yeah, I grew up with magazine pornography was it. Actually, my first exposure was when I was about 11 years old to a bunch of guys at school looking at a deck of playing cards with pictures of naked women on the backs of them. So obviously this wasn't as nearly as accessible and readily available then as it is today. But so my ramp up, if you will, in my relationship with pornography that lasted for essentially 30 years, 3 decades, was a slow ramp up, like it was for most guys my age. Hard to get to the material, but I took note of what I saw, liked it, wanted to go back to it. Found that one of the drivers of me pursuing the material after getting over the novelty of it, being the main driver, was really this idea of being accepted by my peers, to laugh at the dirty jokes, to snicker at the pornographic images, when someone would bring them to school, or we'd be out and, over at someone's house looking at their dad's stash, was to be accepted, was to be one of the guys. And for me, that happened at a time when I had actually moved from where we used to live in LA up to a place called Spokane, Washington, which I thought was, God's version of hell on earth. 2.5 feet of snow, 32 degrees below zero. And it was Thanksgiving. So, leaving the nice sunny beaches and Southern California lifestyle into this place. And then, of course, to be as a fifth grader ostracized by your friends and treated as an outsider. I had a deep gaping wound inside of me that cried out for acceptance. Mm. and pornography just happened to be there at a time that that also um, moved me from what had been a kind of a tormenting life as a kid in school, being bullied pretty severely, which you probably wouldn't imagine with my size now, but back then it was very real. To all of a sudden, the bullies being in that circle of friends looking at pornography, that if I snickered along with them and laughed along, then I was one of the guys and I wasn't being picked on. So originally it was kind of a survival response. It's like I either laugh at this or I, look at it with appall, and the torture becomes worse. But I just share that part of it because all through my life, as I'm sure you guys can relate in your own way, there was always a core belief that was closely aligned with my relationship with pornography. Over time, as I got to the material, it became more about this is what it means to be a real man. And so, being sexual with girls, having them want you sexually, them making themselves available to you, I felt like, being that guy meant that I was being a real man. And of course, thinking for sure that this was going to go away when I met the woman of my dreams, which I did. A sorority girl from University of Georgia that was a year out of school. I was an IBM, a new IBM sales guy working out of Seattle, and we hit it off, and it moved from there into engagement to being married. And I thought, well, surely this is going to go away. I won't have to ever worry about this because she will just magically be able to meet all of my needs, including my sexual needs. And then, of course, what happened was it got worse as I had to deal with, her stress, or the stress of marriage, her issues, her PMS, her things that I'm learning about that I didn't remember seeing when we were dating, and of course her having to deal with my stuff, and so it just ramped it up. But really the biggest jump for me, it was always a very close personal but hidden relationship with pornography and with masturbation and with acting out. But it really took a big hockey stick turn up around the mid 90s when I happened to be in the technology industry. And so I was using the internet internally within our business long before people knew what the internet was in the general public, which meant that I knew the people that knew how to get to porn when internet porn first came out. And so I became an early adopter of internet porn addiction. And back then we would use high-speed corporate networks to access the material because no one was looking for it. No one was doing audit reports or filtering it or what have you. It was only later on when that started to become a known issue that I shifted over to using it in my personal time and at home. But then again, that's when you could start to get faster access at home. So bottom line is I had a 30-year relationship with pornography that continued to escalate, that really got accelerated in the mid 90s. And by then I had been able to see some new genres that I wasn't familiar with before that were more arousing and got me deeper into the pit, into the hole. Always had a theme that I pursued of typical of porn, right? Of the guy acting dangerously, having sex with his secretary or someone that was out of bounds. And I was married. I've been married for 13 years. Always had fantasized about that. And then one day I was in a business with my brother where he was living in Seattle. I was living in Atlanta at the time. So I didn't have any accountability at all. Was my own boss, basically. And a client came to, or a customer prospect came to our business, was looking for a pretty big order in the business I was in. And she was 20 years younger than I was and started hitting on me, and I responded to that. And it's like, this is the perfect woman from porn. She looks like the person I'd fantasized about. She acts like her, had the personality, everything. She's younger. She's, I think, wealthy, all these things. And it was the perfect storm for me. And I was just an affair waiting to happen. And she was porn with skin on. And so I jumped into that unapologetically. was my wife suspected within a couple of months that something was going on, asked me about it, and I very arrogantly said, yes, I'm having an affair. And that's really when all hell broke loose. It wasn't really until about a month or two later that the first gift, the gift of authenticity, came into my life, and that a very close friend approached me and said, "Michael, I have something to share with you. I'm a sex addict. I'm addicted to pornography, and I have a sexual addiction." And I remember my response. I thought, well, first of all, why are you telling me this? And secondly, what is that? What is sex addiction? And so he said, well, he started to tell me, well, the reason I bring it up, he gave me the textbook definition of sexual addiction. Still didn't understand what he was talking about. And he said, the reason I'm bringing this up to you is because I've been watching you and listening to you over the last couple months, and talking about how Patty's not enough, and this other woman is amazing, and she's your soulmate, and all that. And he said, I'm just wondering if maybe you don't have the same problem. And of course, my response was, well, thanks, but no thanks. I appreciate you for oversharing, and move on to another topic. But he said, no, wait a minute, just before, this person didn't live in the same town. We were on the phone. And he said, before you dismiss this, let me just share with you a little bit about my story. And he started to share his story. And within 2 minutes, much like when we, Nate, took a walk and started to really share our experiences. I mean, it's like, wow, did this guy like grow up with me, or was he in the same house? Or, I mean, how does he know? How could we have done all this same stuff? Because that was a secret. I hadn't told anyone about what I was doing. And that was the first gift that I received of, wow, I'm not in this alone. Someone else actually, that there is a name for this. And so I went online and took the 25 question sexual addiction screening test, and of course blew that out, and realized that I had a deeper problem, and went on a walk with my wife at the time, Patty, and told her, oh, by the way, I think I have a sexual addiction. And she's like, geez, what else? Catch you in an affair, and now you're a sex addict. What else you got? I mean, throw it at me. But amazingly, she was one of those women who really fought for our marriage much harder than I did. And I was one of those guys who recognized that he had a problem, didn't recognize the depth of the problem, but knew I had a problem. But I wasn't willing to get well. I didn't really want to give it up. I didn't want to give up my affair partner. I didn't want to give up the porn. That was like my best friend. So I played games with it. I faked my recovery for 2 years. Faking my recovery cost me my marriage at a time when I had all the many more resources made available to me than most guys did back then, including, by the way, a guy who was willing to be my mentor. And I turned them all down because I wanted to have my cake and eat it too. So that ended up being what cost me my marriage. Divorced in 98, became suicidal in 99. As I had come to the realization of what I had done, had lost my wife, by now had lost my affair partner, discovering she was with about 5 or 6 other guys who were married with kids. And, I'd found, I wasn't saying that to demonize her. I found the perfect partner in porn, right? It's all about the sex. There's no emotional connection, no commitment. And yeah, so I got exactly what I was looking for. But it had a really bad hangover effect to it, and dropped me into a deep depression. It wasn't until I was suicidal and started thinking about what I would write in a suicide note to my boys that somehow that just was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I fell apart. I fell into just a crumbled mass on the on the floor of my apartment in Atlanta. Long ways away from my boys and the neighborhood that we lived in, and the ball fields that I coached them and played with them at. I was in a sterile corporate environment and some corporate apartments, and I came to the end of myself. I cried out to God in a way that I had never cried out to God, and this from a guy who was a born again believer that accepted Christ when I was 27. in part because of Patty, because of my wife and her family and their testimony. But I knew that I had drifted from God. I had basically turned my back on him and walked away. And I thank God for that moment of brokenness, of finding my rock bottom, because I know now that it could have gotten a lot worse. We could have been burying someone in our family, my wife or my kids or myself. But that was the moment when I cried out to God, and I, honest to God, felt God speaking to me, not in an audible voice, but I could tell it just like he was. And I remember him saying, Michael, I'm right here. I never left you. You left me. And the very next thing I remember doing was this just guttural, God, teach me how to talk to you again. Teach me how to pray to you again. I had estranged myself so much from my God and my Lord and Savior that my first admission beyond help, I'm at the end of my rope, was I don't even know how to talk to you. And that started a long, slow climb out of the pit that has essentially brought me to where I am today, living out the 12th step, if you will, of being able to take my story and my experience and allow God to use it to leverage and help others. And I always tell people, if you give him a chance, God will use your story for his glory. And
So
that's kind of my existence now.
at what point after that, thank you for sharing the story, by the way, did you start, I mean, you wrote your first book, which I got years, how long ago was that you wrote Porn Nation?
It was a couple years after Nate published his book. I think it published in 2007 or 2008.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that book. So at what point
Thanks.
did you, hit your rock bottom and start climbing out and discovering life, real life?
Yeah.
When did that turn into a career, basically traveling around debating Ron Jeremy, stuff like that?
Just little things like that. Yeah. It really, I took a couple of years to really work on my recovery. Wasn't planning on getting into this, but there was just this very clear call that I felt from God. And also a very scary thing that happened when I was in the midst of all this with my wife Patty, where I remember her coming out of the prayer closet. This was where she would just open up to God. We were still married, still living together, but she's trying to deal with life with an unrepentant sex addict, right? Who's faking it and playing games and driving her to suicidal thoughts. And I remember her coming out of her prayer closet one day, and she said, God really spoke to me today about you. And now, again, remember, I'm the self-centered, egocentric, compulsive lying, pathological lying, sex addict, hearing this, and I'm kind of like, oh, well, what's that? She said, he's going to make you a mouthpiece for this disease. And I remember hearing that going, thanks, but no thanks. It's like, I don't think that's going to happen, right? I mean, I'm sitting there still having thoughts of my affair partner. When am I going to see her next? Porn, acting out, all that. And, but that's what's happened. I mean, God created, I put it this way. I never went looking for this ministry. God brought this ministry into my life as what I believe is a normal progression and part of the healing process. If you're not getting well, you're not going to ever be in a position to want to help other people out of this pit, because once you start to get clarity and start to see how much this has robbed you of life itself, there's no sane, compassionate man or person on the face of the earth who wouldn't want to go help someone else when they're healthy enough to be able to do that. I didn't think that I was going to be doing it for a career, but God just opened up the doors, and then it was very clear. It was kind of funny. I was telling Nate, I had actually made a run at trying to do full-time ministry in this area before I was ready. Had some wise people come alongside me and say, you might want to work on your recovery a little longer, which I did begrudgingly. And at that moment was in a job change, switched over to another company, had the best job that I'd ever had in my life. Could make the most money, had a perfect sales territory. I was in technology sales, working for a global 50 company. I had it set up to make a lot of money and to do it with a guy who was a recovering alcoholic himself. He totally supported me and everything. I mean, it was just golden. It's like, wow, I could see myself doing this the rest of my life. And 9 months later, it was like 9 months into it, I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable because I knew that I was supposed to be doing this. And all of a sudden, not when they were about to fire me, but actually I was doing really well, when things were at the very best, it's like I sensed God saying, okay, now, what? No, let's do this in a couple of years. Let me get some money in the bank. It's like, nope, now. And so I took my last paycheck from corporate America on February 28th of 2002, and that's when I started Bravehearts. And the first person that I turned to was Reggie Campbell, who Nate referred to. We met at his Radical Mentoring Summit. Reggie, I had approached a year before with the mindset of, if I can make this work, I'd love being able to do this. And he was unimpressed. And this time he reminds me that he said, the second time around, you didn't ask me to be a part of this. He invoked himself into the ministry. He basically said yes. And I was like, yes, what do you mean, yes? And he said, yes, I'll be on your board. And I said, well, I haven't asked you to be on my board. And he goes, well, you're going to have a nonprofit. You're going to need a board, right? Yeah. And he goes, yeah, I want to be on that board. This is a guy who, Nate will tell you, has probably turned down hundreds of offers to be on boards of directors, right? Very, very successful businessman, Christian, wonderful man. But yeah, coming to Reggie, he said, the difference now that I see is before it was like, if I can make this work, if I can make the numbers work, I'll do this. Now, I think I just heard you say, if I have to do this out of the trunk of my car, I need to do this. This needs to be done. And he said, I want all in on that. And it has been the most amazing journey. I would not give up this last 15 years of being in full-time ministry for anything. I probably tell my guys that I mentor, I love them more than I do my wife, just by sheer number, because I talked to so many of them. Just spent a weekend retreat with a bunch of them at a nearby lake. And I mean, I truly love these guys because, I see myself in their story. We're all just, like you say, Nate, we're all just bozos on the bus. Mm-hmm. And I love my bozos, I love this bus. Mm-hmm. And I'm so saddened that so many people in the church shun, the guys that we love and know. And I see every single guy as redeemable. And I think that's what gives me the passion to do this ministry and the passion to just connect instantly, immediately with guys like yourselves, mm-hmm. who are also in this area of ministry, because I know that this is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
So tell us about the transition into radical mentoring, not just mentoring, because mentoring sucks compared to radical.
Now, wait a minute. Okay. Well, actually, radical mentoring is Reggie's gig, but,
okay.
but what I'm doing is fairly radical.
You are mentoring. Your mentoring is what I was talking about. It's the best.
But it is a radical form of mentoring. But let's just say Bravehearts mentoring for sake of clarity, so we don't confuse people. And I send all of these people over to Reggie's website. No, the mentoring thing came late in the game. I mean, I was doing for the first year or two, my focus was on helping guys who were struggling. And I was doing it in very personal ways, like starting telegroups, teleconferencing based recovery groups, essentially, just trying to help as many guys as I could from falling off the cliff. Right. And then, that was great, but it was hard to make a living doing that, working with about 12 or 13 or 14 guys and not having any scalability at all. didn't want to be a counselor or a therapist, and thought there's no way I ever want to do that. But then, what happened over time was pretty amazing, by a sequence of events. In part, one of them being a member of what's now the largest church in America, North Point Community Church, Andy Stanley's church. Somehow he heard about my story. Again, I didn't go looking for it, but he approached me, asked me to come speak to. He and I went for a walk. That was one of my first walks, Nate, by the way. He said, "Let's go for a walk. I have some questions for you." And he just really wanted to understand this area better. Didn't know why his pastor friends were struggling and leaving the ministry over this issue. Off of that share and conversation that we had, he invited me to come speak to their staff of 120 men or whatever. They have about 200 plus staff, and I spoke to the men. Someone else spoke to the women. And then out of that came basically coming into Sunday morning service, and with my ex-wife, and I still don't remember how in the world we pulled that off, but she and I had been divorced by then for a couple of years. She had remarried. I was still single, but Andy invited us to come speak and share our story at North Point, and we did. And the series is called Exposed. If anyone's interested, you can go to my website at bravehearts.org and watch the video. It's on the homepage, and we shared our story. And out of that, about the same time, I had been discovered, or my story had been found out by people at ABC News. 2020 was trying to do a story. They'd been looking for someone for 2 years to be able to interview a couple, and who was still married, but dealing with the issue of sexual addiction. I told them, "You're not going to find them. You're not going to find anyone who's going to go public on that. I will probably be the closest you'll find." And my wife and I divorced over it, but we have an amicable relationship, and we'll talk about it. So anyhow, long story short, I did a lot of public speaking, a lot of media appearances. The book deal came out of that. Wrote 5 books, traveled all over the world, did a lot of stuff with Campus Crusade as an evangelist, using my story as an evangelism event. And I think we just lost Nate, but did he disappear? Oh well, that's all right. But did a lot of travel around, and essentially was flying over this issue at about the 40,000 foot level, and not really going deeper along with guys, because I was the awareness and education guy.
Okay.
And so in the process of doing that, I feel like we did a lot of good. We helped raise a level of awareness on this issue. The Ron Jeremy porn debates were kind of a part of that. It's kind of a fun thing. It's probably a whole separate segment in and of itself.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Your guys, I'm sure, would be. Yeah. There's some great stories there, really great stories, and he's still a friend, by the way. But love that guy, actually. Don't love what he does, but love him. But anyhow, so about I guess about 10 years into my ministry, through a set of circumstances, I'd met Chrissy, my wife, and actually gotten remarried. She was in the Army. We were assigned to the Washington, D.C. district, and so we moved up to Northern Virginia, and I was away from kind of my support base and the things I was doing up until then, which was a lot of traveling and speaking and all that. And just my schedule started slowing down. Guys continued to come to me asking for help, and all of a sudden it was kind of hard to say no. So I took on a couple of guys and just said, "Listen, I'll walk through this with you one-on-one." Pulled out all my recovery material that I'd used, the Faithful and True Workbook by Mark Laser and some other stuff, and just started meeting with them for an hour a week, just one-on-one. And 2 people grew into 10, grew into 20, and long story short, after 5 years, I've mentored over 100 men, about 120 now. Some of my first guys that I started working with 6.5 years ago, I'm still mentoring them. I basically built that as the centerpiece to our ministry now. And I really believe that the mentoring model works really well in this case. It's kind of like a Silas on steroids, if you will. But it's a different approach because I'm working with many guys, whereas most Silases can only really work with a handful of guys without making it a full-time job. I have created a full-time profession out of this, and a model to help other guys who want to, not just men but women, who want to be full-time, what we call sexual integrity mentors. And if they want to do that for a living, I've got a model that will pay you well, and we'll be self-sustainable. And that's what I'm doing with Bravehearts now. We're in a multiplication model, trying to replicate this. And I've gone through and held my first couple of training sessions of new mentor training and certification. And our goal is to put a sexual integrity mentor in every church in America
Nice.
within the next 10 years.
That's
So.
great. So what kinds of people that are listening right now are the target of Bravehearts ministry that you say, okay, if this is you should seriously think about this?
Yeah. Well, the great thing about this is really we're looking for the same thing you guys are looking for. We're looking for more bozos on the bus, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's guys who are looking for freedom. I still manage my own mentoring practice, but we've developed a mentor training and certification program that I present to my guys that I'm working with and say, listen, want you to be free from this. You can be free from it. And by the way, you're going to, at some point in time, probably want to help others. And you can do that in a number of ways. But if you feel called to actually mentor and you want to turn this into a career, I feel like I have the best job in the world because I get a front row seat at life change and transformation. And I get to go deep and long with guys and develop great relationships with them. So, now you're not going to go through mentor training in your first month of recovery, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're looking for guys that have bare minimum a year of sexual sobriety. So for the guys that are ambitious, but want to get there at some point in time, I say let's focus in on you first and getting you well. But then just know that there's a possibility of doing that, or even just leading a group in kind of a stepping stone, more like taking a Silas role in the process of becoming a mentor. Now, there are some people out there who, like you guys are the seasoned, I've been in recovery for X number of years, they've had all this sobriety, and I'd kind of like to learn how to do this, or I'd like to be able to do this just to become a better helper, a better Silas perhaps to the guys that I'm working with, or maybe work with more people in my church or guys that come to me. And so we get a ton of people that are coming into the training now for that. So it's fun. I mean, I've kind of gotten to the point where it's like if you've got a couple of months of strong sexual sobriety, but you're in your first year of recovery and you want to go through the training, go through the training. I'm not going to certify you as a mentor until you're a lot further down the road, but go through the training. It can help you. It can help you be much better at giving that help to others. I love what you'd say, Nate, in terms of everyone that the guys that we work with, we believe that everyone needs help and they have help to give. So this is something Nate and I have been talking about in terms of how your model of a Silas and our model of a mentor, sexual integrity mentor, could really work well. And I could even see it as a logical progression for some guys.
So how do people connect with you and the different, because you have a few different programs that they could check out. Where do they go?
Yeah, they go to bravehearts.org. So it's just like the movie Braveheart, but with an S on the end of it. Bravehearts.org. They can, get to me that way easily as well. If they want to talk, if anyone, feels like, hey, I feel like I have the qualifications to be a mentor right now, I'd love to talk with you about mentor training. Would love to talk with you about that. And if you're looking for help, we have group mentoring sessions that I lead using technology like this. We're doing a lot of the similar things that you guys are doing, except we don't have the face-to-face groups that you do, which is what I am very envious of Samson Society for, because I think that's so essential. But one thing we do try to do is to encourage guys to find those groups wherever they can. So hopefully we'll be able to work together in the future and just give guys more tools to be able to get well.
And if you want to check out some of Michael's books, you can just go to Amazon, or are they on your site?
You go to Amazon. They're on our site as well.
Okay, there you go. So one-stop shop. Just go to the website. Nate, what do you got as we wrap up? We're reaching the end of our time here.
I don't know. This has just been such a refreshing season for me ever since Michael and I connected there at the Radical Mentoring Conference. I really feel like there's a new season here for Samson. And how great it is to walk the road together, whoever God brings along, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's see where this road goes. God's in charge. Well, I think we've just about come to the end of our time, haven't we, Aaron?
We have.
Yeah, but I do hope, Michael, I'm going to extract from you, as I often do our guests, a promise to return. You'll come back for a follow-up conversation. I hope several.
Absolutely. Would
Yeah.
love to.
All right. Okay. Well, then, until next time, I'm Nate.
I'm Aaron.
And I'm a pirate. I am
Right.
now, right?
All right. And we're your buddies on the Pirate Monk Podcast. We'll see you next time.
Oh, 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 you're a good guy. Oh, 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 you're a good guy. So I sing a simple song. You're a good God, and all creation sings along.